You all know me already, I guess. Robert Webster, WR8RW. Been a ham for 8, 9 years. The 8 call comes from Ohio. I got my call sign when I lived up outside Youngstown. Why this? There is some data that the ARRL have collected. And one of the interesting pieces of data is that 50% of people who get their technician's license never get on the air. So if you had 10 people in this room, half of them statistically would not get on the air. At least that's what the ARRL have found. My friend Ethan Poole, KW4EK from Anderson, and I have been talking about this for some time, and we think it's a crying shame, really, that only half the people who take the time to go through a class like this, get their technician's license, never broadcast once. So the purpose of this is to help you out. You have your ham radio license. Well, we think that will happen. So now what? In speaking with new hams and with some of the surveys that have happened with new hams, they have found out that they don't know what to do. Now, that may sound strange to you, but it isn't really. If your dad or mom gave you the car keys right after you got your driving license and said, drive from Greenville to Charlotte, yeah, right? You need somebody to help you, right? And so what we're trying to do is start a program, and we don't know where this will go or may not go, but we're trying to start a program where we provide information for you about how you can get on the air with some very simple stuff. Beginning with where in the world you can operate. Now, I know Gary, I see you've got a band plan sitting out there, and Gary and the gang have probably told you about where you can operate, but let's review just for a second where you can. Starting from the bottom, 70 centimeters or 440 to 450 megahertz, 420 to 450 megahertz. Then you got 2 meters, 144 to 148. You got 6 meters, 50 to 54. The green and the red talk about RTTY and data or phone and image, like slow scan TV, right? Then you start getting up into HF. You got the 10-meter band where you can do some RTTY and data. You can also do some single sideband phone between 28.3 and 28.5, right? That's the beginnings of HF, right? That's that you're knocking on the door of HF. Then you can go up to 15 meters, 40 meters, and 80 meters and do CW. I don't know a lot of folks who have just gotten their technician's license who are going to be playing with CW, unless you were a CW operator in the military. And then if you were, good luck and have at it. But this is where you can play. This is where you can operate. Most generally, it's going to be on the 2 meter and 70 centimeter band to start with. Why? Because that's where the equipment is that is the most affordable, the most available, and where a lot of people operate day over day in the local environment. Some advice that I got, and I will pass along to you, and I have passed along to a number of other hams. When you buy your first rig, and I know some of you have Baofangs here tonight, buy the best you can afford. And if there's a $10 or $15 difference between getting a used piece of equipment and getting something off of Amazon or some other reliable retailer, spend the extra $10 or $15, okay? Now, when we're looking at the equipment, you know, we've got the Baofangs, we've got TYTs, that's also made in China. We've got Olinkos and Yaesus, and we got Kenwoods, right? So you look at the number of dollar signs and they get a little bit larger. You can expect this. It's like automobiles, right? You can get into an entry-level automobile and then move up. Don't feel obligated to go and become radio poor by getting, you know, a lot of Kenwood. I have Kenwood equipment. It's good stuff. It may take you some time to get there, but don't worry about it, right? Same way, if you get a 2-meter mobile or a 2-meter base or a 2-meter 70 centimeter radio that's a mobile or a base, you got Lyxen, Yaesu, ICOM, and then Kenwood. That one on the right, on the lower row, TMV71A, if you can afford it, that is a solid piece of gear. I have 2 of them. I have one in my radio rack in the house. I have one in my truck. I've had it there for 7 years, and as John Cameron Swayze used to say, like about Timex watches, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking. There are some advantages to that, but we're not here to talk about equipment tonight. But if you look at the range, of equipment here, the Baofeng will work. There are some precautions you have to take. Sometimes they overheat, right? But they'll work for you if you're talking back and forth to a local repeater, or if you want to do point-to-point simplex. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, right? Buy the best you can afford. Don't get yourself into a lot of financial difficulty, but buy what you can afford and learn to work with it. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Here's the point in early amateur radio experience where people just see the wall come up. And this is powering it up and setting it up. Now the power up's not so difficult. If you have a battery charger, you make sure the battery is charged, and following some of the safety precautions, excuse me, that Tom talked about a little earlier this evening. Put the battery in, power the thing up, and see if it starts. Yay, you've gotten to square one. But there are some other things that you will need. You know, my wife has asked me from time to time, oh, aren't these options? No, you need them, right? You're going to need extra batteries, at least one. You're going to need a battery charger. You're going to need a programming cable and programming software. I didn't have a little picture for that. And as I put it down at the bottom, ye old computer, right? If you are going to do a mobile or a base station, there are some different things that you're going to need. One, you're going to need a power source. If you're going to put it in your vehicle, that's a car battery or a truck battery. If you're going to use it in the house where you have access to regular, you know, Duke power, that's a power supply. It's an MFJ power supply. You're going to want a good, solid power supply that puts out between 12 and 13.8 volts. You're going to want to have the hookup wire. You're going to want to have Anderson power poles. Some folks aren't very happy with those, but Anderson power poles are very common. They're very standard. And if you happen to take your radio over to somebody else's house and you're trying to fix it or you're trying to work it, Anderson power pole, you put them together, and guess what? You have electricity to power your system, right? The wires are connected together. Very, very common connector, very, very flexible for use between your vehicle, inside the house, remote site, etc. On the right side, in the middle, fuses, as he was speaking about tonight. Most newer equipment, when you get it from the manufacturer, will have a power line on it. They are starting more and more to use what they call the blade fuses. It's like you have in your automobile right now in the fuse box, right? Very easy to insert, very easy to remove, very easy to take out to look at to see if you've blown it. You're going to want spares, especially if you begin to try this out. You will probably blow a few fuses. Get good quality fuses. You have your programming software and you have your programming cable. These are things that you will want to acquire soon, especially if you've got a handheld. You're going to want the charger, you're going to want the battery, and you're going to want the programming cable. Attempting to program some of these newer HTs or handhelds by doing it from the front panel is difficult. So if you can get a configuration, and we'll talk about those in a moment, if you can get a configuration from somebody else for your local area, put it on your computer, get the programming software, get the programming cable, you're good to go. One thing that you will want to make certain of when you begin to do the programming, and this is kind of a preview of something we're going to tell you in a few minutes, make sure two things. First of all, your programming cable is manufactured by the same manufacturer as your radio. The reason for that is if you buy a knockoff, if you buy an aftermarket cable, whoever put that together may not have access to or know what the correct chipset is. And yes, there's a little bit of a chip in that programming cable. If that chipset's not compatible, you just bought yourself a piece of wire, because it will not connect successfully your computer to your radio. Also, when you go to program your radio, you want to make certain that regardless of which programming solution you use, and we'll talk about those in a minute, that you have all the correct drivers. Windows, Windows is generally the platform of choice for for radio manufacturers. So you will want to make certain that you have all the appropriate drivers for the Windows system so that your computer will talk to your radio to program it. Generally, they will tell you what drivers you need, or now with the advent of Windows 10 and some of the more sophisticated operating systems, they may already be there, but check it first. If that wall was small, this wall is bigger, and it's actually programming your rig. Kenwood has a program for programming, a program for configuring your radio, MCP2A, right? It comes with the radio, or you can download it from the Kenwood site. What I would recommend these days, given the fact that things change quickly, that you would download it from the Kenwood site, because some of those CDs may have been sitting around quite a while. If you load something from the internet, and I don't want to be mean about this, but especially if it's from overseas and you download it, before you unzip it, before you expand it, run virus check on that on that module you get. Okay? I would do it on CDs as well. They may be a little less apt to have that if they came straight from the factory. But if it comes from a website, there may be some misbehavior going on there. So I would suggest you virus check it. As I said earlier, most but not all software is Windows only. So just make certain that if you're going out to a website to download free software to program your rig, that you get the right one. Generally, there is Windows, but you'll have Mac and Linux available as well, so just download the right one. There is this thing called Chirp. This is an open source programming software solution that's available on the internet. It's magnificent. It supports so many different types of HTs, and my TMV71A mobile can also be programmed with Chirp. So Chirp is your friend. It's out there. I don't exactly remember the website, but it's out there. It runs on Windows, Mac OS X, and Linux. I've got Windows at the house. I've got Mac OS X. I've got Chirp on different machines. I can take the same configuration with Chirp, plug in my radio. It depends on where I am and what I'm doing, and it will work. It will work. I told you about the programming cables. Beware of the clones. This sounds like some Star Wars thing, right? But beware of cloned cables, because the chipset may not be compatible and you will have purchased yourself an expensive piece of wire. Now, this point at the bottom of the page, although it's at the bottom, it's really important. Learn, understand, have somebody help you know how the changes are loaded to your radio. And you think, well, wait a minute, how can there be a number of different ways? There's two that I know of because I've experienced them. First, if you're plugging it into Chirp and you have a config, you have it up in the Chirp window, you download it, right? And you'll see a little progress bar going across your screen and it downloads to your radio. If you have a piece of Kenwood gear, like I do, okay, the changes occur real time. So what you do is you plug your radio in, you download, for safekeeping, what's on the radio already, right? You download it and save it. Then you take and you clear the radio out completely. Or if you're satisfied with what's there and you have something you want to add, you open up the configuration file that you want to get the data from, you select that and you copy it, you go back over to where your radio is on that tab, you go down and you paste it beyond the end of what you've got. Because again, the Kenwood does that real time. There's no upload, download. It's you copy it, you paste it, it's there, okay? The only reason, I'm not trying to confuse you with this, but look at your manuals, or if you can't find the manual, go online, find somebody who's got that same piece of equipment and ask them to show you how to do it, because they differ. They're not all the same. Okay, another wall that new folks in amateur radio run into is, I've got this HT and I can't do much with it. Not very true. If you look on the left, we're talking about an HT. One of the things that I would do, and I have done with my HTs, is you get the longer antenna. If you get the longer antenna, you've heard Gary and the other guys talk about, you know, half-wave length antenna, 5/8 wavelength antennas and things like that. It's true for 2 meter and 70 centimeter handhelds as well, right? The longer antenna gives you better performance. Well, okay, but you know what? That doesn't do much for me either, because if I'm in my car, I don't have a mobile unit yet. But wait. Over here on the right, you see a broken down mag mount antenna for the roof of an automobile, okay? You can take a mag mount antenna like that, put it on your vehicle, right? Run the cable through however you want to. I'm a mag mount fan. Some people like to drill holes in the roof of their car, and I'm not a fan of that, right? You can take a mag mount antenna, you can run the cable inside, you can purchase an adapter cable with the SO239 and SMA end on it, connect it up to your mag mount antenna, connect the other end of that adapter to the SMA connector if that's what you've got. You can also get SO239 to BNC if you have a radio that has a BNC connector on it. In the car, you now have a mobile rig. Folks have expressed a concern, well, it's only 5 watts. Let me give you an experience. My wife does not like amateur radio equipment mounted in her vehicle, right? Before we moved down here, she had family down here. We lived in Ohio. I wanted to have a radio. Took the 5-watt handheld, put a mag mount antenna on top of my wife's car, up and down through the Appalachians. On 5 watts, I was making contacts all over the place with these repeaters on the mountaintops, 5 watts, okay? So your handheld actually has more flexibility than you might think. With a mag mount antenna and this little adapter cable, put it on the car, you've got a mobile rig. The thing that I would encourage you to do if you're going to do that, and I don't have a picture of it here, but the Baofeng comes with a little headset, right? You can plug it into the side of the radio and you got a PTT there, okay? Kenwood has several like that that you can plug into a TMV71, and there's aftermarket versions of that. Be safe on the road. Just as you use hands-free with your mobile phone, or I hope you are, when you're using your mobile phone on the highway, you can also use close to hands-free with amateur radio. You've got a little boom. I've got a thing with a little boom mic here and a headpiece here, or an earpiece here. I've got a little PTT that I button to my shirt, right? Or I clip to my shirt. I can go up and down the road like that. I know exactly where it is. I don't have to take my eyes off the road. Be a safe amateur radio operator, please, okay? Now, again, the mobile, if you're going mobile or base, you've got the mag mount antenna. Mag mount antennas can do interesting things for you. You've got your PL259 connectors, you've got your cables. Now you can buy, if you know the distance that you're going to need and you're not real good at soldering, You can go to places like DX Engineering or the Wireman, and that's one thing that we have to our advantage here in upstate of South Carolina. The Wireman, one of the most renowned cable supply houses for amateur radio in the States, is located up here in Landrum. Okay, I know the family. They're very great people. Wireman, thewireman.com. They can make a cable for you with the ends on it. You can buy it or you can drive up and pick it up, no shipping. But you've got yourself a cable. Please exercise the safety that Tom was talking about when running cables and configuring them. Because regardless of whether you've got 2 meters, 70 centimeters, 10 meters, what have you, you still need to practice those safety items when you're doing this. Now, your first contact. Around here, we are fortunate in the upstate of South Carolina to have a number of repeaters, thanks to these mountains that border us and these high pieces of ground. You will find that you can make some real interesting contacts on repeaters. The 146.610 that's owned by the Blue Ridge Amateur Radio Society, the 145.47 that's owned by K9OH, that's Billy Irwin, he's the South Carolina Emergency Coordinator. Both up there on Caesar's Head Mountain, you can get some great distances on those. Some repeaters are linked. So if you're talking on like Billy's repeater, he's got links down toward Columbia. You can be talking to people in Columbia or even to the shore with that. There's also the SC Heart system that when there is no kind of emergency going on, you can talk through the SC Heart system all over the state through repeaters, all right? Basically, a repeater has two frequencies. It has its own receive frequency and its own transmit frequency. Its receive frequency is the frequency that you will transmit on to get to the repeater. Its transmit frequency is what you will listen to for other traffic, all right? There is a separation, and here you see you've got 6 kcs of separation. If you need some help with repeaters, I think these guys can help you if they haven't covered it already in a tech class. I don't know if they do anymore, but call one of us. You've got my contact information. I can talk you through it. Then there's simplex. This is point to point, like you had when you had your walkie-talkies when you were kids, right? Same thing. Point to point, things like mountains, buildings get in the way, but you know, if you're down the block, across town, not a lot of obstacles, it's good for you. It's one frequency. This fellow is talking 146.520 to somebody in a vehicle that's 146.520. Frequency sources for a lot of this stuff can be found out on the internet. You can get the ARRL repeater directory, and they've got little copies of it that are about this wide and about this tall. I don't know, they're $8–10 anymore, I guess. Gives you all the repeaters in the US and some in Canada. If you have one of your handheld radios has a scanning capability, just start that thing up, see where you find traffic, record the frequency, and then program it into your radio. And word of mouth. As I was just telling you, you know, we've got 2 big repeaters right here, the 146.61 and 145.47. You've got 2 of them right there that you can listen to. On the 146.61 at 9 p.m. every night, we got the Blue Ridge 2-meter net. And that's where some of you have heard me before. So you got duplex, you got simplex. The thing that you want to learn about repeaters is the frequencies, the offset direction, and what they call a PL tone. PL stands for private line. It's had its genesis back in the day when they wanted to make certain that only certain stations could get into a certain station. And so that's what PL tone. PL tones now are more commonly used between or for repeaters when the frequency of another repeater is close by. Example, although we don't have a PL tone on 146.61, every now and again when tropospheric ducting kicks up or there's something going on in the atmosphere, some guys out around Conyers, Georgia, on their 146.61 repeater will break squelch on the one on Caesar's Head. Okay? PL tones help that, but the folks who are the holders of the primary call sign, the custodian of the primary call sign, doesn't want to put a tone on the 6.1 up here, so we don't. And then there's Echolink. If you, for some reason, don't have the funds to go get an HT, you've got an amateur radio in your mobile device in this thing called Echolink. As long as you have an internet connection, Echolink can get you all over the place. I mean, all over the place. All over the world, as a matter of fact. It's available for iOS, which of course is Apple, and Android through the App Store. You can also use it on a desktop or a laptop machine. You go out to echolink.org and you can download the software. The thing about it is you must have your amateur radio license. They will not allow you to download it from the App Store or wherever it is the Android stuff comes from, or from echolink.org unless you can verify that you are a licensed amateur radio operator. This is one of the easiest ways, really, to do amateur radio if you don't have an HT or don't have the desire to get one right now or can't afford it. People say, well, this isn't really amateur radio. Well, I can test that a little bit.
Welcome to the W4 and YK repeater.
There you go, right there.
I'm on Echolink right now and I don't have a radio.
Yeah. Okay. The thing about amateur radio, and I think this is one of my parting slides here to you. We have guys that do CW and they only do CW. And they love it. But just as, 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have these mobile devices that we call each other on, we store pictures on or anything like that. We have migrated in technology. Amateur radio is doing the same thing. It's not like it was 100 years ago entirely, and it will never be. Some folks like to stay back there, and that's okay. Amateur radio has such a broad spectrum of things that you can do with it. Don't be concerned about checking out the new things that you can do with it, because it still takes a license. You still have to know the techniques. You still have to have the information right here in order to operate it legally. It's just a different way of doing it. So try Echolink if you like. It's pretty nifty. So now that you've got your license and now that you've heard this little song and dance that I've given you tonight, what else can you do? Well, there is this saying, and it's true. Your technician's license is a license to learn. It's a license to learn more things, to expand your horizon. Come check in with us on the 6.1 net some night. We're 9 o'clock if you got the time. You'll enjoy it. We have some good rag chew on there, and we have some special features we have week over week and once a month that you might enjoy. Go mobile, like I told you earlier, but strive to be hands-free, okay? Go fox hunting. You guys talk about fox hunting, Gary, in the technician class? Yeah. Okay, so you're familiar with the concept of fox hunting. Do that, a lot of fun. Play with tropospheric ducting, watch the weather, understand the weather conditions, listen and see, right? We have had some nights on the 6.1 repeater, we have had people as far as Bristol, Virginia, checking into the net. Crossville, Tennessee, because there's just that nifty stuff going on weather-wise with the atmosphere that they can get in. Shoot for the moon. There's this Earth, Moon, Earth stuff that you can do on 2 meters with other people on the planet here. Or you can talk to the International Space Station, right? Public service and emergency communications. I'm going to make a short pitch for this. As I said, I am the emergency coordinator for ARRL for Greenville County. Emergency coordinations is not what it used to be, right? It's a little more involved. And actually, I like to call it more public service than emergency communications, because there are opportunities that you have being a part of an ARRL group, and we're recultivating ARRLs in Greenville County right now, that you can do public service without, a lot of police and fire and things like that being around. You can help nonprofit organizations. You can help hospitals. You can help civics or civil groups, right, to do things. You can be radio communications around a marathon, a 5K run, a bike race, right, where they may want people stationed at strategic places in the event that it's a tight curve and bicyclists somehow lose it. Right? So there's all those sorts of things you can do. Understand your equipment, what it can and cannot do. This is another thing that gets in the way sometimes of folks who have their tech license. They haven't had the opportunity, and I'll say it like that, they haven't had the opportunity to play with it. Don't be afraid to play with your radio in terms of the programming and things like that. You can't break it. Just make sure you save the config off someplace and you can reload it. Antenna operation and antenna building. This is one of the things about amateur radio, especially when you get your general ticket, or if you go for your extra ticket, you're playing with these HF antennas, and you learn antenna modeling. There's all sorts of neat stuff that goes on with that. You can even do so with 2-meter and 70 centimeter beams and some of the nifty antennas you can play with and build. I mean, you can build a good antenna sometimes for 10 cents on the dollar, what they're selling it for at DX Engineering or Ham Radio Outlet. Right? You can just do that. If you're up for it, prepare for your general. Your general class license will give you another gateway into a part of amateur radio that people have gotten into for years. Worldwide chat. Things aren't so good right now because the solar cycle's a little bit crazy, but in another year or two, things are going to start back on the upside. I can't tell you the number of times that with QRP, low wattage, I have made contacts. I made two or three with a guy in Krasnodar, Russia, on the other side of the Black Sea, 5 watts twice, 100% copy. Wow. It's amazing what you can do and what you can learn if you experiment with this stuff. And that's what amateur radio really is about. You know what you can do, you know what you've got, but then there's that unknown that you can go after and you can try. And then CW. Yes, it's old, but it's a language by itself. I'm trying to learn CW, right? And it takes some doing, and it takes some concentration, but you know what? It's digital communications that's almost 200 years old, right? Zeros and ones, dots and dashes. And it's I don't know, it's interesting, it's neat, and you can confuse your neighbors. So anyway, that's what I had for you tonight. With one parting thought, quoting a friend of mine, Mike, AK4HR, always remember to keep the magic RF smoke inside the radio's components.
Mike's also known as Alaskans for Human Resources, AK4HR.
Thank you. So there you have it. If you've got questions, do we have a few minutes for questions? Okay. And otherwise, you've got my email address, you've got my phone number. Give me a call. I work from the house during the day, but I will try to get back to you as quickly as I can. Any questions, guys?
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
You touched briefly, Gary did before, on this ARRL. It requires special training and all that to get into this, or?
Yes and no. And I'll tell you the no part first. If you want to be a part of my ARRL crew, there's some things that I expect. I expect you to be willing to help us work with the Red Cross, the Greenville County Sheriff's Service, the hospitals, okay? To be willing to do that. And sometimes it's not all glitz and glam, right? We're attempting to help get radios programmed. We're attempting to get frequency lists built so that we as amateur radio operators can interoperate between one another when we're sitting in the Greenville County DHEC trailer, or the Emergency Operations Center, or the Operations Center in the basement of Greenville City Hall, okay? So that kind of stuff is mundane, but the thing is you're building a relationship. You have the opportunity to build relationships with people who make a difference in your community, all right? One of the things that I'm trying to do since I got my role here, I'm working with my colleague Pokey Burnett over in Spartanburg County, with Mandel Rigdon in Pickens County, and with Randall Phillips in Cherokee County, so that the 4 counties up here, we can work together if something big happens, and our squads are not really big at the moment, right? If something big happens and we need each other, it's kind of like mutual aid for some of these fire services, we can call upon one another, see if we have people to deploy to help out, Okay, so there's things like that that we do. There's a Mount Mitchell bike race or something like that that Spartanburg County do, and I've said, Pokey, sign me up, come on along. So there are things like that that you can do. There's also a lot of learning that you can do. You talk about the training. After September 11th, 2001, Department of Homeland Security was put together. FEMA put together this protocol, it's NIMS, right? It's a National Infrastructure for Emergency Response. There are courses you can take online for that.
There's hundreds.
There's hundreds of them. Yeah, there's hundreds of them. But my point is this. Anymore, when you are going to start working with formal emergency operations centers like the one in Columbia for South Carolina, or maybe even Greenville County, we have to know the language of emergency response. That's what the NIMS courses are about. 100, 200, 700, 800, those are the numbers of them. And some of the others, I've taken them because I was a public information officer for amateur radio in Ohio, so I had the extra ones, right? But it's fundamental learning. Think of yourself as going to a foreign country, and maybe you want to speak the language so you can get around a little better. That's what taking those ICS courses does for you. But after a while, it becomes a requirement from some of these agencies that amateur radio operators have this training and are able to demonstrate it. You don't have to show them a certificate, but you have to be able to demonstrate it in an emergency situation. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. If you are interested in coming to our Greenville Aries meetings, give me a call. I can tell you when they are. Anybody else? I hear no snoring, so I must have done my job, Gary. Thank you guys for your attention tonight.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Robert.